the nucleus of all of this. I didn't wake up one day. I'm 19 years old, 20 years old now. I didn't wake up one day and say, I'm an angry white man. I have a problem with people who look different than me. I was just like everybody else. I was just like you. I said we could all get along. We should all get along. What difference does race make? I didn't wake up and say that we need white identity and white consciousness, but I saw enough of this to realize what was going on here. And I know people don't want this to be the case. I talked to many people, friends, family, journalists, all kinds of people. And they all tell me the same thing. It's very divisive, or it's very negative, or it's very pessimistic. It's unfortunate people don't want to think about it. It makes people uncomfortable, but that's the way it is. And they've programmed you so it feels uncomfortable when you talk about it. But clearly they're fine. They're comfortable with white people being skinned alive, boiled, drowned, raped, murdered, all the rest in South Africa. To talk about it is white nationalist propaganda. You have a problem with that humanitarian catastrophe? You're a neo-Nazi. You're lumped in with all the bad people. Here's a tweet from Jared Holtz. Tucker Carlson's advertisers should know he's responsible for dropping explicit neo-Nazi white genocide propaganda into the president's skull. Neo-Nazi propaganda? Tucker Carlson is drawing attention to a real constitutional reform being pushed by the president of South Africa to take white South African land without compensation. That's neo-Nazi propaganda now. If you talk about that injustice, you're a neo-Nazi. Can you believe this stuff? When you talk about the plight of the poor Syrians, or the poor Iraqis, or the poor Iranians, or the poor Yemenis, or the poor migrants, or the poor Mexicans, fine, fair game. Fair game. You can exaggerate that all day long. ICE detention centers, they're kidnapping people and separating them, and they're chopping babies' heads off and cooking them into food. You know, all that exaggeration is fine. You know, I have family members who come home and talk about the atrocities of ICE and what's happening there. It's a modern-day Holocaust. That's fine and well. You talk about people getting skinned, raped, boiled as a white genocide, and that's explicit neo-Nazi propaganda, starting to see the narrative, starting to see the foundation of this neo-Nazi. And notice it's no arguments. That's what amazes me. This doesn't really give anybody any pause that there's no arguments. You know, Tucker Carlson says this is going on. It's horrible. And you can Google white genocide South Africa, Google images. Be careful, you shouldn't be eating when you look at Google images at the results, because you will see blood splattered on walls. You will see people's skin hanging off of their faces, children, adults, many cases. And so you look at that and you have a problem with that. That's neo-Nazi propaganda. Very interesting, right? No argument against that. Tucker Carlson says that's a bad thing. And it's not, the answer to that is not, well, here's why that's not happening, or here's why that's different, or here's counter statistics. What do? That's neo-Nazi. That's white nationalist. And what does that get the average listener to do? The average viewer, the average person is listening to Tucker and saying, gee, that's rough what's going on there. The wheels start turning. White people kind of did bad things to all the other people for a long time, whether it was colonialism or slavery. Europe dominated the whole world, enslaved everybody. And now, because we're nice, those people are exploding in their fertility rates and they're pouring into our countries. Well, in South Africa, where white people are 9% of the population, they're getting their heads chopped off, and it's only been 25 years. I wonder what that's going to look like in our country. The wheels start turning. And so what is the response by the media? Do they say, here's why that's wrong, here's why that's not going to happen, here's why you have no reason to be concerned, here's a solution, well, I understand No. You're a neo-Nazi. You're a white nationalist. You even talk about it? You even think about it? You feel any sympathy for their plight? You're a neo-Nazi. Do you think that in 50 years it's really going to be a great place for you and your children to live? Think about your children. Maybe you are not going to experience this. One of my grandmas, who doesn't watch this show, I brought this up with her, and she said, "Oh, I don't care. I'm going to be dead." And, that's a nice mentality. So for the boomers in the audience, if not you, maybe you think this is not a big deal. How about your children? How about your children's children? Is that the world you want them to inherit? Right? And that's really what got me thinking is, if I'm going to bring life into this world, what's that going to be like for my children when they live in a country that is non-white? Is that going to be an improvement? Does anybody believe that for 5 seconds? That the country getting less white and becoming majority non-white, does anybody think that'll be an improvement? Really? And I know people will say that's racist. I know people will say that's white nationalist or white supremacist, but they can't say it's wrong. Because nobody in their right mind, nobody can look you in the eyes and honestly tell you that this country becoming majority non-white will be an improvement, will be a good thing, because it won't be. And you know it's going to happen. You see it in South Africa. You saw it in Rhodesia. And that's why they can't let you think about it. That's why they don't want you to look at it. That's why this white genocide thing cannot be allowed to become mainstream or popularized, because people start to see that and the wheels start to turn. They see the writing on the wall and they're going to change their behavior. Suddenly it's going to be a different ball game. Suddenly, if the question becomes getting called a racist or living in South Africa, people are going to choose getting called a racist if it means they don't have to live in a country like South Africa. And once people are able to make that calculation, right now it's a difference of, do you want to be called a racist, or do you want to not be called a racist and basically be fine, right? Put your head down. Nobody really bothers you. You're able to live basically all right. You may have to move maybe every 15 years, right? And you have to avoid certain neighborhoods. But if you don't, either you get called a racist or you're basically all right. Well, if we convince people that that's really not an option, the latter is really not an option, eventually you're going to run out of places to escape to. Eventually, you're not going to be able to put your head down. You're going to be attacked. You're going to be persecuted. Well, then people are going to say, yeah, maybe I'm okay with being called a racist. Maybe, I'm not. We don't have any racial hatred, but perhaps we have to do something about this. And maybe we get called a racist, but so be it, because the alternative is far worse. And that's the calculation they can't allow people to make. So that's really the power of what was tweeted last night. I know a lot of people are saying, well, Trump won't do anything about South Africa. Or so what? Trump cucked on other issues. That he's drawing attention to this, that this has entered the mainstream and the public consciousness cannot be understated. The value of that, because people start to think about this, and we see demographics as not on our side, because of course, as immigration and the fruits of immigration, which is the children of immigrants and so on, as that reshapes the political climate of the country and the electoral alignment of the country, Texas goes blue, Arizona goes blue. We know, we all saw the video from Charlottesville. People might say the time is not on our side, because electorally speaking, it'll be tougher and tougher to win elections as non-white people grow in the proportion of the population and they vote Democrat. That's true. But by the same token, as that happens, as people become acclimated to the conditions of their new country, they will start to understand. They will see. Seeing is believing. We are all on board with this, and we know what's going on because we're the high IQ people. We're the conceptual people who we can look at the data and we can look at the numbers and read the testimonials, and we can put two and two together. We're the people that escaped the nightclub fire first. But once people start to see what's going on in their neighborhoods and their schools, their kid comes home from school and they're talking about how these kids are picking on them, and, they talk about the lunchroom politics, things will start to change. You'll see very quickly. So there's a lot of power in what was tweeted last night. Hopefully there's more talking about that. It's very risky because it is something that it's implicit, but it's very bordering on the explicit, because it's a very popular talking point, and for good reason in these circles. But hopefully that's pushed more. If not, I think that's sufficient in and of itself to get the noggin jogging. And look, I'll reiterate. You don't have to be, and this is the benefit of the America First show. This is the mission, is to show you that you could be me. I'm a handsome guy, a normal, smart guy. I'm not a skinhead. I don't have a swastika tattoo. I'm not a hater. I don't come on the show and spew racial epithets. I'm not a racist, You could be a totally normal person You could not be what the media makes you out to be, but you can understand what's going on, and you can talk about it, and there's nothing wrong with that. Once you understand that that's what it's all about, then it all makes sense. Why is it that the Nazis are bad, but the communists are not? Well, because the Nazis represented white nationalism, basically. They represented proto-ethnic nationalism for white people and white solidarity. So that's why everything goes back to the Nazis. Why is it bad for white people to organize in their self-interest? Well, Nazis. You know, and Hitler, if we're going to talk about both sides politics, you know, horrible, evil man, right? And not Christian, so evil. But you have to understand, why did people like him in Germany? Because he saved the economy. Because Germany was getting the shit kicked out of them by these international people, by these international politicians and bankers at the Paris Peace Conference. And so here was a figure who had made Germans feel proud about their history and saved their economy. And so you have to understand where it comes from. You know, people who say, oh, well, it was just all evil and all manipulative from the start, they're going to fail to prevent something else happening because they will not, because of their own pride or because of their own hubris or for the sake of their shoddy argument, they will not admit what the strengths were, what was going on there. And so that's why it always has to go back to that. Why is Richard Spencer banned from all these things, but you know, countless black nationalists or Democrats or Islamists or killers are not? Well, because Richard Spencer speaks up for white people. I mean, that's what it is.
Americanism, not globalism, will be our credo. It's going to be only America first. America first.